out. So
That's right. So you're in Aiken, South Carolina, and I'm just up the road a ways from you, a little bit outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And Chalice Press is actually based in St. Louis, so that's the geography for everybody out there who's watching. And tell us a little bit about yourselves. As we were talking a little bit earlier, none of us are really natives to the South, but we've been here a little while. Tell us about the work that you're doing there before we jump in and talk about the book.
yeah, well, we've been married for coming up on 10 years, I guess. She's put up with me for almost a decade, and
He's nodding. You got it right, Brian. You got it right.
Exactly. So we got married in Oklahoma. That's where she is from and kind of grew up and everything. I eventually got to Oklahoma in high school, and I got married, went to Atlanta, and spent time there for seminary, and went down to Alabama after that for 5 years. We were in Fairhope, Alabama, wonderful place way down south. They're right off of Mobile Bay, Bay of the Holy Spirit, they call it. And so we were down there for 5 years, and then we kind of felt the nudging to come this way, and we've been in Aiken for about 11 months now, and it's been great. We're at a First Presbyterian Church here, and I'm pastor, and it's a fun place. Great congregation.
We have 2 daughters along the way. You didn't.
There are souvenirs. We keep having daughters wherever we go. So we had our first one in Atlanta, Annabelle Grace, and then we had our second one in Fairhope, Paige Noel.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. This question just occurred to me with the topic of your book, Be Holy. I wonder if the culture of the South, is holiness just sort of something that's kind of in the culture, in the religious culture? That what was? Do you think that contributed to kind of the impetus for writing this book at all?
Well, bless your heart, Steve. I don't know. It's interesting. The first time I preached on one of the passages that came up in the book, I just started talking about holiness a lot more and had a study about it afterwards, and it just kind of grabbed me, and it was a fun topic to talk about, and it was a lot of fun to teach on and to work with people about, and I learned a lot talking to others, and it was a topic that definitely grabbed us where we were at that time, and so it was a good conversations all around about it, and I think in some ways it did have something to do with it. I think also the trend in our culture, even beyond the South now, with the spirituality buzz, and so I think that feeds into it a little bit, and so I think holiness is a more specific term there than spirituality, but I think that kind of triggers a lot of people's interest in holiness right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for folks who maybe haven't read the book yet, tell us about it, and tell us, just give us the sort of introduction to the book, and kind of how you approach it.
Yeah. Megan, tell us about it. That's good. No. The title's Be Holy. So first and foremost, it's all about what does that mean to be holy? You find it kind of over and over throughout the scriptures. It's quoted everything from Leviticus all the way through, and the epistles and the letters. You talk about holiness in the Gospels, and then in the very last book of the Bible, in Revelation, let the holy still be holy. And so all throughout it just kind of echoes. And so we have this call that's very central in our scriptures and in our story to be holy. And then I think a lot of people just kind of ignore this or kind of toss it aside. It's not that it's an intentional thing necessarily, but it just almost seems impossible to some people. And so what they do is they equate it with different words like perfection or spirituality, and so it either blends in or it gets washed out in some way. But it's a word that just means a whole lot, and it's a calling and an invitation, I think, to something very meaningful. And so the title Be Holy is there, and then I think when you're exploring that, when you're going on with this journey towards holiness, and as you start pursuing this and start exploring it with God, I think that's when you start to discover who you are, and so you find identity. You start to discover where you belong, and so you find belonging. You find community. You find other people on this quest with you, and then you find a purpose, because I think that you're called to be set apart for a reason, for God's purpose. And so I think each and every one of us have that purpose within us, and so I think part of the journey is finding that. And so, yeah, so that's the way the book's divided up. Starts out just talking about what it means to be holy and kind of what that is, and then it kind of fleshes out a little bit more the find identity, find belonging, find purpose.
Yeah. I'm just curious, Megan, as you've, it sounds like a good bit of this content is stuff that you've preached on and you've taught in your ministry setting. Kind of what's been the reaction or response from folks in your own community to this message and kind of looking at holiness in a different way?
What do you think?
He hasn't. I mean, he's preached on some of it.
Okay.
I don't. People are intrigued by what it means to be holy in general.
And I'm not saying I'm lazy, Steve, but when I'm writing chapters on finding identity, suddenly my sermons look a lot about identity and who God is telling us we are. And so I think there's definitely some overlap there and some stuff that came in tag team approach for it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not even sure if everybody picked up on that. That was in my last congregation as I was going through it. So a lot of the stories that they'd heard me preach on found their way into the book. And
gotcha.
that was kind of a fun thing. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I imagine, I haven't written a book, but I imagine as you're writing a book that it would carry over into those other areas. So
it spills in. And it goes both ways. It's kind of neat.
For sure.
Working on it, I'd start hearing stories from people around me, and obviously my mind's focused in one direction, and they mention a story, and all of a sudden it ties in somewhere, and I'm like, that's really neat. And so. Yeah, the guy I worked with down there, the pastor, Matt, at that church, is a brilliant guy, and I really enjoyed working with him. And a couple of things that he would say in sermons over the course of the 7 months or so it took me to write this, a couple of things that he said in sermons would trigger my thoughts and somehow make their way in there. And so, yeah. I think one of the unique things about your book is the message, really your heart that came through was really for young adults. While the book, it really appeals and is relevant for everybody across generations, you had a real particular sort of sense for young adults, 20s, 30-somethings, maybe even younger. Tell us about that. What was the driving force there for you? Well, yeah, I think I was drawn to that age group because that's age group I am familiar with in a lot of ways, and did a lot of youth ministry. We used to work in youth ministry together, so we know we did a lot of that stuff and camping conferences and retreats. And I used to lead some college stuff up at Montreat. I'd take kids up to college conferences, and it's an age group that I enjoyed working with and spending time with and being included in for the most part. Depending on how old I get, I'm still lumped in there sometimes. But yeah, I think I really enjoyed it, and I think it does. In the preface to it, I mentioned something in there. This book is targeted towards young adults. Brad Lyons at Chalice, awesome guy. He helps you really kind of narrow your focus as you talk to him, and so he kind of pushed me to say, who are we looking at with this, and what does that mean as you're writing it? And so. He kind of pushes you to take the step of looking at who you're directing this towards, and it really was 20s and 30-somethings that are somehow connected to a church or somehow connected to spirituality, back to that word there, but might not be fully invested or might have some questions about it and some serious concerns, and so it kind of got targeted towards them a little bit. But then beyond it, it goes on to, I think, anyone who's really asking the questions of who am I and where do I belong and why am I here. That's the identity, belonging, and purpose. And so I think it spills over. I will say, I think the hashtags got anybody over the age of 35. No one gets them, except for my grandfather enjoyed them. He said
That's
I
right.
enjoy hashtags, but that's my favorite part of the reviews I think I've read so far. One guy said it's a good book. I would recommend it. The hashtags are easy enough to ignore.
That's right.
So that was my favorite part of it right there.
So if you're not familiar with the hashtags, yeah, it's a fun way that you've kind of sprinkled those throughout the book, and it's very contemporary. It's very now. It's very modern. And obviously, I use hashtags all the time on social media, Facebook, Twitter, etc. So, yeah, you kind of know what the hashtag thing is about, or you don't. It's, you know.
True. Jimmy Fallon taught me how to speak in hashtags, so.
That's right. Nice. Gotta love Jimmy Fallon.
Oh yeah.
So folks who are reading the book, what are you hoping? What's your I guess big hope for folks who read the book, or the big takeaway that you're wanting them to get?
I think kind of the overall message, and this is beyond kind of beyond what's written there. I guess the overall message is that I think we have a fun God. We have a God who invites us into a more real life than we're aware of sometimes. And so I think God laughs with us in addition to crying with us at the sad times. I think God plays with us. And so I think in some ways I'd like for people to kind of see the invitation to be holy as an invitation to a different way to live life, in which you can maybe, to quote some of the catechisms from my denomination, to glorify and enjoy God. And just spend time thinking about that. And what does it mean to be holy? It's not, I say something in there, it's not being a worker drone for God. It's enjoying what God gives you and the life that God's blessed you with. And so the journey towards holiness is not a boring calling. It's a very real, great way to live, to experience life, to be with God and with others. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of the underlying thing there. I think it's been given a boring rep from people throughout the centuries, and this quest towards boredom is not really at all what I think it's about. I think it's a quest towards a more real way to live. So I think that's kind of the basics behind it.
Yeah. Let me grab a question here from the comments on YouTube. This is from Beth. She asks, is holiness as a term a generational phenomenon? What do you think about that?
Is holiness as a term a generational phenomenon? Well, it's been around for multiple generations, so I'm going to say, I'm assuming you're talking about, is it like a trendy term for our generation? I guess I'm going to kind of take that.
Sure.
I don't know. I hope so. It's coming back in style. I think spirituality is, and so Beth, right? It was Beth who wrote it. I think this whole spirituality thing is catching on huge right now, and the idea that I just want to be plugged in but on the periphery, so spiritual but not religious. I just kind of want to dabble in stuff when it's convenient for me, but not necessarily get the full flavor of it, as I think kind of how a lot of that comes. I think holiness is a little different than that, and so I don't think holiness has caught on to the same degree as spirituality has. I think holiness is a little bit more of a holistic view to look at. You got to kind of dive into holiness. There's not really much dabbling there, and so I think the invitation to be holy is a fuller, richer, broader invitation if you accept it. I think spirituality has more appeal because it's a broader term, and yeah, I don't know. Good question, Beth. Well done.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit more. I mean, I'm curious. You talk a little bit about how the book was kind of as you're writing it, kind of with the young adults in mind, and this idea of holiness being, say, a richer experience than spirituality, which can be surfacey. I'd just be curious to hear more of your thoughts on that when we talk about the nuns, the NONESs.
Yeah.
Like you said, spiritual but not religious. Now we've got a new term, the DONES, the DONES, the folks who still have faith, but they're just done with church. Period. They're not going to church anymore. If you're familiar with that term, and that's kind of come about.
Yeah. I don't know. That's a broad pitch there to take a swing at.
It is. I just teed that right up for you.
You're right up there, Megan. What are you going to say to that? I'll say this. This is a cool thing. Bill Lamar, great guy. I met him at a Duke Divinity Foundation's Christian Leadership thing. Bill Lamar said in that group, and this is something that stuck with me. He says, "Where there is light, there is a shadow." Especially when you're talking about church and when you're talking about institutions and all that stuff. And so, where there's light, there's a shadow. And so, the church is a place that has shown a great light in shining God and Jesus to this world. And so, I think it's a wonderful thing. But realizing the institution and the size of it, there's a shadow there. And so, I think in some ways, we as a church need to be honest about that. I mean, there's things that go on in the church that aren't always good, that are unhealthy. There's scandals in the paper. Anything that happens outside the church is also inside the church, unfortunately. And so there's bad things all over, and the church is an imperfect institution. And so it's one of those things in which we have to realize that the church is here for a specific reason, but it's made up of humans, and we're imperfect. And so the whole duns thing, I get. I get that people have been burned by church. I get that people have been hurt by people in leadership positions in their congregations. There's some really sad things that have happened, and I get that. The nuns are people who maybe they've experienced that, maybe they haven't, maybe they just see the shadow too much. Maybe they don't get to see the light as much as I would hope that they would. Maybe they don't get to hear the stories about. At our church, we have a necklace ministry. They started making these necklaces by hand. People sit down and make them, and they sell them for $5 a piece. It goes to benefit HIV positive mothers trying to feed their HIV negative babies over in Mwandi. And so because they're HIV positive, they can't breastfeed their children without possibly infecting them. And so they sell these necklaces for $5 a piece to go over and to buy formula for these mothers trying to keep their babies safe. They just raised, after these $5 necklaces, in the past 6 years, they've raised $200,000.
Whoa. Wow.
There's some light that is being shown through the church. There are some great things that are taking place within this institution. And so I think in some ways people need to see that there's more than just a shadow. I don't think that the shadow is even as big as the light that's being shown. So I just, to go back to kind of the broad swath there, I think the nuns and the duns, I get it, and I resonate, and a lot of the objections they have with church are the same objections that I would have with church. But I haven't given up, and I think that there's a lot more light there. So I kind of throw that out to you, and I give that a reason. I do think in the middle section of fleshing out kind of the be holy, I talked about find belonging. Stanley Hauerwas says saints can't exist without a community. Holy ones, saints, can't exist without a community, can't exist without others around them. I don't think I could make this journey on my own. I really don't. And so I think it's one of those things where we need to realize our limitations, realize that we need each other, and come together and try to do it right. I don't know. Did I answer that at all, Steve?
Yeah, that was great. That was great. Really, I love the shadow and light idea. I
That's
think that's
Mark.
really
He
helpful.
actually says it cooler. When he says it, it's more like, well, there was a shadow, there was a light. And he's got a way cooler voice than I do. Neat.
So does Howard Wasp.
Yeah, he does.
Cooler, not just cooler than you, cooler than just about anybody. But
Yeah.
When you're talking about the nuns and the duns, are you talking about young adults who are moving away from church?
Primarily, primarily it is, but I think it goes beyond that in some ways. It comes from help me out here, Sid. I think in some ways it goes with an institutional mindset, and so I think this even goes beyond kind of the young adults into the generation above them some, where there's this distrust of institutions. Yeah. And so I think it even goes beyond that, and I think the biggest jump in the Pew Research Forum was that it jumped the nuns category, those who clicked the box with no religious affiliation at all. That jumped from, it was like 4 to 17 or something. It was ridiculous. Over the past like 10 years, that was the biggest by far jump out of any other category. And so I think it's a lot of young adults. I think it's people in the generation above them too.
It is.
I don't think it's contained to any one area either. And so.
Yeah, you're right. But it is a higher percentage in the 18 to 34 demographic. It is a higher percentage of folks who are claiming that no religious affiliation identity. So it's interesting that it ties in there. I've got another question here from YouTube. This is from Violet, and this kind of goes back to just wrestling with the different definitions and connotations of the word holy. She says, we talk in my church about how we're trying to reclaim words like testimony to be authentic and relevant. Do you address the connotations of the word holy in your book?
I think that's a great question, Violet. I do, I think. I hope.
I think you do too.
In the first 3 chapters, it's kind of looking all at holiness, Violet. And so what I do is I look at it, one, from a very piecemeal scriptural view, where I kind of pull out random scriptures that talk about holiness, and I think that leads into, if you piecemeal scripture together, you can get it to say some odd things sometimes. And so I think some people do that with holiness, and I kind of talk about that some. I talk about how I think people have taken holiness into weird directions where they do equate it with perfection, and I don't think that it's the same thing. I think holiness is a separate thing than perfection. I don't think we can be perfect. I do think we can be holy. And so I think there's some connotations with that word that people associate there. So I hope to kind of take some of those away from it and just leave you thinking about what it means to be set apart as you are with others and for a purpose. And so set apart with, from, and for. And so what does that mean to be set apart in that way? And so I try to kind of do that, and then I give you kind of the broader scriptural view as I see it of it, and where it kind of leads into that, and where I think that we see this story kind of throughout the Bible of this this invitation to be holy. We see people trying to live this out in our story in the Bible, and then how it kind of continues with us. Trying to throw in a lot of quotes, because I think that people have been struggling with this even after we stopped writing it down in the Bible. So I try to kind of bring in some of that with it, bring in some stories and examples. And so, Violet, I hope I do kind of talk about the connotations in there, and I hope that you could see that. And so that was my intent, because I do think that holiness is a term that we should reclaim. And I think you obviously belong to a very awesome community if you're having that conversation, and I think you need to bring some testimony with it. That's great.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thought. Interesting to hear it from Violet in her context that is a conversation that they're having of how to kind of take some of this language that's good Christian language that's sort of gotten, I don't know, for whatever reason, it's gotten old, it's gotten moldy, it's not fresh anymore, and trying to revitalize it and kind of rejuvenate it and give it some new life. Have you heard about, I'm just curious, other examples of that in church ministry where of kind of, I mean, I think like you said that your book, this is a really strong attempt to do that, to reclaim that holiness language that really, frankly, I mean, a lot of people, thinking about nuns and duns, a lot of church traditions probably have been beaten down by this concept of holiness, kind of hurt and kind of run out of town on a rail, so to speak, with a moralistic definition of holiness, and not the one that you talk about in your book. Anyway, I'm rambling now.
Nah, no, I get you. I'm with you. Yeah, I think the term holiness is a term that we should strive to reclaim, and I think there's things that are in our tradition and in our history and in our story that are wonderful things. And just because we haven't touched it in a while, or maybe we've focused other ways, there's always things that we can learn from reclaiming stuff. And so I think this is one of those things where it just isn't one of the most talked about subjects anymore. But I think it's a good subject to spend some time on, and I think it can help shape our understanding of why we're here and what God's asking us to do. So,
I think you're right. In some circles, it's not, but in a lot of circles, it still is. But it is that moralistic definition that puts a lot of pressure on people. And I think your message is a life-giving one that says this is a gift from God for us to receive, and just like you said, to be who you are, and to live into that, to fully live into kind of who God's created you to be. That's a really permission-giving, life-giving, hopeful message that I hope people will who are maybe coming out of those church traditions that kind of put that kind of pressure on them would be able to grab a hold of this and find hope and healing from.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, Steve. I don't. It's not my message, but I hope that was the message that I get from it when I read the scriptures, and that's the message I wanted to share. And so, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to. Thank you for saying that. Am I blushing? Am I?
Well, here's another question. This is from Tracy on YouTube. Is this book geared toward the individual or church in general? From the title, it goes on, an individual seeks to find identity, belonging, and purpose, but these are also qualities our churches should be seeking.
This is Tracy. Tracy, great thought. I do think that this book is probably more targeted towards individuals, but what I'll say is that I think it overflows in the sense that there's a whole section in there about find belonging, and I think in this section, I think a lot of what I'm trying to spend some time with is the idea of we as individuals need to kind of reclaim this search and this journey we're on, and this invitation that we're invited into, and so to be holy, but I don't think we can do it alone, and so in some ways I think someone told me it sounded like a critique of the current church, and I don't think it's a critique as much as it's a call to action. I think there are some places where the church can do better, and I think that the church is doing better, and I've seen some excellent examples of that, and I think that we need to highlight those and celebrate those. And so, I don't think it's geared towards churches. I would hope that the people reading this get plugged into their communities, and it helps to blend into the churches in that way. And I hope that this becomes a communal effort. And so, I think it's written towards individuals for the most part. There is a wonderful study guide coming out soon, Tracy. Chalice Press has got that, and they're kind of formatting some stuff and going to bring it out. But I do think that this is something that could be studied in groups and would be helpful. I'd love to have more conversations about it. And so part of the reason I wrote it was because I was enjoying those conversations so much. And Yeah, I think a good question. I think that's something that the churches should spend some more time with, and I hope they do. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, I think, like you said, the book was written with people in mind, but and not necessarily as a resource for churches that are sort of trying to rethink things and how they do ministry and who they are as a community. But yeah, I mean, this Tracy could have found us a whole new market for this book.
There you go,
That's
Grace.
good.
There you
That's
go.
great. I'll send you some commissions or something. One of the things I'm really curious about, and really this would be a question for both of you, Brian and Megan, is this identity piece. Obviously, you move from the whole, the talking about what it means to be holy, and then you move into the identity piece. Identity is something that I've found to be just so important to me in my life in figuring out who I am and how I'm wired, who God has made me to be. And I'm just curious what some of the things that you found in your own life to be helpful and even maybe you would say necessary to discover who you are and who God's made you to be. Could you share just a little bit about kind of what your journey's been around that whole identity piece just for yourselves?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we both grew up in the church, and we were lucky enough to, I feel like I was very lucky to grow up in the church because you have a community that are kind and encouraging you as you're going through crazy times and trying to find yourself, and you're able to learn God's word and see his love with other people. We both worked at a church camp, and for me, teaching God's word to young children and youth and doing youth ministry, that's where I found my identity, was teaching it to others and helping them learn about God and his work. That was it a lot for me. And now having kids and teaching them who they are as God's children, that you're constantly finding your identity in God. It's not really it doesn't ever really stop for me.
She's cool, isn't she? Yeah, I think she's right. We've also had the conversation. We got married when we were young. I was like 12 or something, I think. I don't know. We got married when we were young. So we were both pretty much right out of college. She had a semester left. And when we got married, we were still discovering kind of who we were. And it's one of those things where I don't know if we ever put it in this language, but we knew enough of who we were that we knew we wanted to be together for the rest of our lives, and we knew that we wanted to figure out who we were together. And so I think we've been on that journey still. And we got married, and 6 months later we moved to a whole different state, whole different city to start seminary and do all this stuff. And it just continued the journey and figuring this out. And I do think that identity is something that we all struggle with. I put the funny movie clip in there of Adam Sandler and Jack Nicklaus talking in anger management, where he just keeps saying, he's like, well, who are you? Who are you? He says over and over again, he's like, well, I'm a mid-level executive at a Petco company. He's like, no, not what you do, but who are you?
Right.
So they listing hobbies and like, no, not what you like to do, but who are you? And so it just it keeps boiling down further and further. And I think the more you go on this journey, the more you dig into your identity and who you are. And I've been really struck by now and in some others who just talk about what it means to identify yourself as God's beloved. What that means to say that we are God's beloved. Before anything else, before any self-rejection, before the other stuff, who we are is God's beloved. We lost the mic. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, you're good. You're good. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's a good journey to be on. Identity is something that I think we all struggle with, and I think we all go through identity crises. And like Megan said, I don't think it's nothing that ever stops. It just kind of keeps going. And so you hear midlife crises, into life crises. Like you have these identity crises kind of throughout it. And so, yeah.
I'm just curious, have either of you ever done a personality profiling thing like Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about those? I'm a big fan, personally.
Yeah.
Of those kind of things. In helping me kind of see myself from a different perspective. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't have my Myers-Briggs memorized or anything like that. I don't.
Enneagram, I did that.
You don't remember it?
No.
As I don't remember, I describe myself as a rhino.
Okay.
So it's
That's his personality.
That's my personality type. I'm personality type rhino. Scott Alexander is a funny guy. He wrote this book about rhinoceros success, and he says that the key to his life is just being a rhino, and so you just charge at everything full speed. You just go for it, and it's like people are gonna hate on you, but it's okay. You got thick skin. You're a rhino. He says people are gonna come after you, but it's okay. You got a horn. They'll back off. It's fine. Be a rhino. Just go. Keep charging. And so. I've taken the DISC test, the DISC stuff, and I used to be straight C. Now I'm mainly D, and I've kind of changed over time. So I do think in some ways that those tests help us kind of see not only kind of who we are, but also kind of how we change. And so I'm curious. You might have taken more of these tests than I have, but I think over time and in the different phases of life I think. When something happens, when getting married, you change a little bit. There's parts of you that are really adapting. When you have kids, you change a little bit. When you move to a different city, you change a little bit. When you start a different job, you change a little bit. And so I think knowing who you are on a deeper level and finding the consistent thread as you are changing from D to C, from ENTJ stuff, all that other stuff, as you're changing through stuff, I think it's helpful to see that, but it's also helpful to find that common thread of kind of who you are that underlines it all. And so, yeah.
And another part of that is just knowing your spiritual gifts and just doing full sort of spiritual gift inventories and that kind of thing, and discussing it with other people, what just your God-given gifts are and how you can use those. I think that's an important way to know who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like, going back to what you shared a little bit earlier, kind of discerning some of that through the ministry that you were doing, the camp ministry, the youth ministry stuff that you both have been involved with. That discernment piece about calling, that's where you go from identity into, into belonging. And then is it purpose and then belonging, or the other way around?
Belonging then purpose, but there's you can go either way. Yeah, you're good.
So the belonging piece establishes that importance for community, like you were sharing earlier. We can't do this alone. Once we kind of know who we are, then we need to be able to see ourselves as part of a wider community, part of the bigger plan. Of what God is doing in the world, and we're not doing this by ourselves. And that goes back to the whole conversation about church and whether people are walking away from the church or hanging on or not. But then that piece of walking into purpose and discerning one's calling, and that's. Again, going back to sort of the main audience, and really, if it's young adults or anyone else, I mean, that's such an important piece for us to get to. And I feel like, your book is another great resource and tool to help people do that important work of discernment about what they should be doing with the one beautiful life that God's given them. What can you I guess add to that about discernment and finding your calling? Any words of advice, or just from your own experience, what's helped you?
Yeah.
My daughter told me tonight I should get a job. So that's one way to get a calling.
Yeah. From the mouth of babes, huh?
What?
From the mouth of babes.
Yep.
Yeah, it's I think discernment's a key thing. I like that you said it was a tool. I hope that my book is a tool in some ways, and so tools you kind of use to do something with, and so I like that analogy, and I think that I would hope that this tool, this book, is added to your toolbox of stuff that you've already hopefully kind of done, and that you are still discovering other things to do. And so I think that I think the hope of it is to kind of spur people along to kind of start thinking that way. I do end with purpose, and I do think that that's a good place to end with, because I think in some ways discovering your purpose, looking for your strengths, your spiritual gifts, kind of pursuing those and kind of chasing after them is a fun thing. And I think when you do that, you start finding more community, you start finding out better who you are. And so it's all related to each other. I have it divided up into sections in the book, but it's not a clear-cut line there. I think the invitation to holiness includes it all. And so I think discernment is one of those things that, to kind of echo the overlap there again, I think discernment, as you're looking at what you're called to do, you got to know who you are, and you got to kind of discover some of those things. And once again, I don't think you can do it by yourself. I think you need other people to help you, and so that's family, friends come into that. I would hope that there's some other people involved as well. I hope that this is somewhat of a holy journey for you, in the sense of you're not leaving God out of it.
Right.
I think churches or Bible studies and all those places are great places to kind of include that community to help remind you that God's involved in this process as you're discerning what is next and what lies ahead and how am I to go on and glorify and enjoy God in this next phase. And so, yeah, I think discernment's one thing that you keep doing too.
Yeah. Beth has a quick follow-up question. She asked, does holiness manifest differently across personality types?
Ooh, good question. Beth, I like you. Those are good questions. I'm assuming it's the same, Beth. I think so. I definitely think so. I think the journey towards holiness is something that we're all on. I think it's going to look differently in each of us. And I think that's where it comes in. I talk about you're trying to find out who you are and where you belong, kind of why you're here. And I think as you go on this journey, we're all traveling it together. We're all going on it in the same direction, but we might all be at different points of it. And talking about spiritual gifts and strengths, and I think it does manifest in each of us in different ways. And I think that God uses our uniqueness in great ways sometimes. And so I think that it does come out in different ways. As we're on the same journey, that's why we have each other. That's why we need each other, because holiness comes out best through all of us. Yeah, good question.
Couple more questions here from YouTube. Tracy has a follow-up, asks, do you address millennials in your book? Would you say you address millennials specifically?
Not by name.
Yeah, not by name. You can write a hashtag and then write it in there if you want to, because I think a lot of the book is towards them. I think it's like I said, written to kind of young adults and millennials in there, and so I think a lot of the book would relate to them, and hopefully the phase of life that they're in. So yeah, I think so. I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it.
Yeah.
I think you could read the book at 16 or 65 and get the same message but take something different away from it. So I mean, I don't think they're necessarily, it's not aimed at just...
To put Tracy and Beth in conversation, I think the journey towards holiness can manifest in each of us depending on who we are and what stage of life we're in different ways. And so I think I do speak to millennials, and kind of like I said before, this is written with young adults in mind. But I think it does. I think it resonates in different ways with different people, and so yeah.
That sounds good. This question, I'll just read it. It says, "This is a shout out and question from one of your old Fairhope Montreat College pals."
What?
And of course, the question is, what does it mean to be holy?
Oh, what does it mean to be holy?
Well, let's see. You got to read these 3 chapters.
Well, it's a wonderful question. I think to be holy, to kind of go back to the basics here, I think to be holy is to be set apart. I think you're set apart not just in the set apart kind of way, not for any reason or no particular reason. I think we're set apart for a very specific reason. That's kind of to follow God and God's plan for us. And so in following this and being set apart for God, we realize that we're set apart with others who are also set apart for this reason. And we're set apart from all the stuff in this world that isn't holy. There's a lot of bad stuff that happens. And so I think in some ways recognizing that we're set apart for God from this yucky stuff that we find ourselves mixed up in sometimes, and with other people who are struggling in the same struggles we are to follow God, I think it's a powerful thing. And so the invitation to be holy, kind of echoing throughout Scripture, is something that's not to be ignored and not to be dismissed. And I would hope that people find it worthy of their time to kind of invest some thoughts and some prayers and some conversations and some discussions about. So what does it mean to be holy? And I think it's heading towards holiness, heading towards God, and enjoying the steps that you take.
That's great. The follow-up question from this person is holiness more a journey or a state of being for you?
Oh, I would say it's a journey. And I think state of being, I might be reading the question wrong, but I think state of being to me implies that there's an end point. And so kind of you get somewhere and you rest. I don't think there's any rest in holiness. I think you're restless until you find it, but then it keeps you busy the whole time. And so it's just kind of it's a funny thing to think about. But I would say it's a journey, and I would say it's a journey that continues to shape and form you, and continues to guide you forward. And so I don't think you do stop. Good questions. Good questions. Kind of back to the basics there. Who is that? What's the name on that? Do we have a name?
The name on that is Book Cow, K-A-O.
K-A-O.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it.
Brandon. It might be Brandon.
So, yeah.
Book Cow Brandon.
Well, we weren't able to be joined by one of your other colleagues tonight. We were hoping to have one other special guest on here, but tell us about who that was and the website that you all are collaborating on.
Oh yes, I'm gonna let Megan introduce Josh. Who is Joshua Paul Kerr?
I met Josh when I was at camp at Dwight Mission in 6th grade, 7th grade. We go way back. He's one of our good friends. He was in our wedding. He's a pastor, newly ordained pastor in Oklahoma, and they have a Master in the Pastoring website. There's 6 of y'all. Yeah. 6, all in their 30s, I think. And they have a blog that they just talk about kind of whatever is going on, kind of relevant stuff in their ministry.
Josh and I lived in a metal house for 2 years together. He's a fun kid. We used to throw those magnetic darts at the ceiling, and we made a game out of it. It was called the Great American Middle House Dart Game, and he's very entertaining. He's a great guy. He is newly ordained. He went to Austin Seminary down there in Texas, and so he got out, and he's in Oklahoma now, and he's doing some great ministry. Some of the other folks on the site, Robert Queering was with me. He was also at the camp. Rebecca Chancellor is actually Megan's sister, also worked with us at the camp there.
Okay.
Kane is one of the funnest pastors I've met in a long time, and he just switched jobs as well around the same time I did and stepped into a new role and is thriving. And Jeannie Barber is also on there, and she has some of the most thoughtful reflections that I've read, and I just really enjoy how each of us post different things in our own ways, and kind of how that comes together on there, and it's fun. They were nice enough to humor me to allow me to go on and post the preface to my book today, and to share it with everybody else, and so it was fun. But they're a great bunch, and the term masterin' the pastorin' is totally making fun of ourselves in this. That is also not an end point, but a journey that we are all on. In fact, one of the things we're doing now is we actually just I got a good response from Carol Howard Merritt, and Ben just got a good response from Brian Blount, and so we're looking at other pastors and other people who are further on the journey than we are that has some advice for us, and so I realized that we're all new to this, we're all still figuring it out, and we appreciate some input from others who might know a little bit more than we do and can help us and encourage us on the path. And so that's kind of what it's all about. It's a wonderful bunch of people that have nourished me in a lot of ways. So
yeah. So you all are PCUSA ministers?
We are all PCUSA pastors.
That's great.
Pros and shows, decently and in order.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
And I'll put the link in the comment thread on YouTube. We'll post it on Facebook as well, so everybody can go check out Masterin' the Pastorin'.
Masterin' the Pastorin'. Yeah.
Yeah. And
that's a fun thing. I've enjoyed seeing what they've come up with and how we've kind of done it, and yeah.
That's great. Just to solve the mystery, that book Kao, K-A-O, is Brandon C.
Brandon, it is you.
It is Brandon.
Good to hear from you, old friend. I miss you, buddy.
Right on. And I'm gonna, since we got the one more question here on YouTube, this is a good one. Violet asks, do you think everybody has holiness in themselves?
Interesting question. I would. Do you think everyone has holiness in them? I'm not sure if. I think we all have the image of God within us, Violet. I think we all have been placed with that inside of us, and I think that holiness is somehow kind of plugging in to that reality. And so, I don't know. I think our choice can be either to accept that we are invited into this holy venture or to reject it. And I'm not sure if holiness inside of us is something that I would. It's just different terminology for me. And so I do think that everyone is made in the image of God. Amen, amen. I do think that. I think each and every one of us is made with that image in us. I think if we decide to plug in to our God and follow God to live the best life we can live and enjoy it the best way we can, I think that's holy. And so I think we all have the potential to kind of follow that and to live into that. But I don't know about being inside of us. Insightful question. You're going to make me think about it tonight.
Right on. Well, it's coming up on 10 o'clock. It's amazing how fast the hour can fly by, but it's been a great conversation. I'm really glad to get this chance to sit down and talk with both of you. Really grateful to everybody who's been online watching this live, asking questions. I want to mention again, as Brian shared, we do have a study guide, a discussion guide that will be coming out very soon. That will be a free download, so watch for that on social media. chalicepress.com, we'll have it there. I'm sure you can find it on briancoulter.com, masteringthepastoring.com, and any other closing thoughts or comments that you would like to make, Brian and Megan?
What I forget? Yeah. Megan is here with me. One of the things that we did was having two daughters that we love and spend all of our time with, and yeah, we read a lot of kids' books, and so they asked me about writing the book, and they said, well, what kind of pictures does it have, Daddy? And they sounded so disappointed when I said there weren't any pictures in it, and so. One thing we did is we wrote a kids book together. Megan and I sat down together, kind of wrote a kids book to go with it. We're trying to figure out if this is something that we can work out and get out there, and what it would look like and how it would take shape. And at some point, I would love to stop disappointing my daughters and to add artwork to this idea of be holy. And so at some point, maybe that'll come out, and maybe we'll continue to kind of prod it along and see what happens. But yeah, that was a fun thing to do, and
cool.
I appreciate everybody too. I appreciate people spending time, and hottest commodity of 2012, as Roger Nishioka says, is time. That's what everybody's looking for, and so he always does it. He says it's time. It's time. So I think I appreciate everybody spending some time with us and joining in this conversation. I appreciate their interest in the book, but I think more importantly, I appreciate their interest in the topic, and I think. Our invitation to be holy is a great thing to spend some time with, and so thank you for joining us tonight. Steve, thanks for hosting us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you both. Look forward to talking again soon. All right.
Grace and peace.